Ramos Dragon Engine is a legendary artifact dragon creature with a converted mana cost of 6. It's a 4/4 flyer, and whenever we cast a spell, we put a +1/+1 counter on Ramos Dragon Engine for each of that spell's colors. We remove 5 +1/+1 counters from Ramos, and we add 2 white, 2 blue, 2 black, 2 red, and 2 green to our mana pool. Activate this ability only once each turn. This is MTG Burgeoning, folks, and here we are on EDH Commander Thursday. And for today, we're going to examine a Ramos Dragon Engine deck tech. Good day, MTG Burgeoning community and YouTube viewing audience. If you are part of the former and wish to join the latter, click that subscribe button now. In today's video, we are going to take a look at Ramos Dragon Engine deck tech. And we are centering this card around an interaction with this and an extremely overpowered enchantment with a lot of Lucky Charm support. So, as is customary here, let's begin with our mana base. So Ramos Dragon Engine is going to act as a true singleton deck, which means that there is no card that has additional copies in it, which honestly would only be basic lands, outside of a small number of creatures like Shadowborn Apostles or Relentless Rats or Rat Colony or Persistent Petitioners. So with that theme in mind, we're going to start off with one basic land of each type: plains, island, swamp, mountain, and forest. So 5 basics, 1 of each. We're also going to add a copy each of the different triomes. Okay, so we've got the Endatha triome, the Rogren, the Zagoth, the Savai, and the Ketria. So 5 basic lands, 5 of the triomes. We are also going to include all 10 shock lands. Alright, so all 10 shock lands are included in this deck. I mean, if we're running a Ramos Lucky Charm deck, we need to have all kinds of colored mana available to us as much as possible. In order to fetch out our triomes, our shock lands, perhaps our basic lands, the full complement of fetch lands, all 10 fetch lands. So all 10 fetch lands are included. And that brings us to our gold color. It brings us to our next subset of cards, which are hopefully going to give us all of the mana that we need. And of course, we're going to start it off with the best land in our format, Command Tower. So that's a definite. We include a Command Tower as it can tap for a color of anything we need. So can Mana Confluence, except we have to pay a life to do that. But sometimes worth it. Next up will be a Reflecting Pool. This, in conjunction with a Command Tower or in conjunction with a mana Confluence, acts as, let's face it, Command Tower number 2. As long as we have the land that can produce the mana, Reflecting Pool will do that. And since we're running 5 colors, it seems very unlikely that Exotic Orchard won't give us some sampling of colors we need to cast our spells. So its inclusion just makes too much sense. And then finally, we have Cascading Cataracts. It's an indestructible land that taps for a colorless, or we can tap 5 and tap Cascading Cataracts, and we can add 5 mana in any combination of colors to our mana pool. All right. So, as is usual with an MTG Burgeoning deck tech, there needs to be a high degree of powerful abilities on a land that creates colorless mana, particularly in a 5-color build such as Ramos Dragon Engine. I mean, we can tap these lands for no colors to cast our commander, but our commander's presence on the battlefield is predicated on us being able to cast many, many gold-colored spells. So the following 4 lands are included because I believe that they do offer us a higher balance of ability versus the risk of not having colored mana. And the first one is Reliquary Tower. Only taps for a colorless, but we have no maximum hand size, which, as you'll see as the deck progresses, we are going to be drawing a lot of cards. We want to keep those cards in our hand, as many as possible, for our end game. So having a Reliquary Tower on the battlefield is going to be immensely important for us. Additionally, a Temple of the False God is not a bad inclusion at all, particularly because our commander is a colorless commander, or it's colorless commander cost. So tapping to add a couple of colorless helps to cast Ramos, or at least taps for a mana tax, for a commander tax. And next up we have an Alchemist's Refuge. Another theme that you're going to see interwoven in this deck tech is the flash theme, because we can remove the mana, or we can remove the 5+1/+1 counters for Ramos at any time, but we can only do it once per turn. So if we can maximize doing that during our opponent's turns and still be able to cast the spells, because they are still, timing restrictions apply on the spells that we cast. So it's not like we can cast creatures, enchantments, or artifacts, or planeswalkers, or any of those things during our opponent's turn. However, with a blue and a green and tapping Alchemist's Refuge, we can do that during our opponent's turn. So Alchemist's Refuge is definitely worth including. And lastly, our last inclusion as a potential additional win con, because we are running a true singleton deck, and all of our lands have unique names, and we have the full complement of 10 fetch lands, it just makes too much sense to not include. I mean, it makes too much sense to not include? Makes too much sense to include? We are including Field of the Dead. Let's just put it that way. All of my eloquence aside, Field of the Dead is included. I mean, anytime we put a land into play, we create a 2/2 black zombie. As long as we have 7 or more lands with different names, every one of our lands has a different name. So Field of the Dead can act as an additional win condition if needed. Okay, so that is the mana base here for Ramos Dragon Engine. So let's clean up the mana base, and then let's start talking about our charms. Alright, so the number of charms included in this deck, at the moment we have 14 charms. I didn't want to say a dozen, because a dozen charms just doesn't sound right, and a baker's dozen is 13, and 13 isn't a very lucky number, so we want to make sure we have lucky charms. So we got 14 charms included. And the way in which these charms were selected were based upon the filing criteria of, the relevance of the modes are very important. We don't want to just include any charm here. Some charms are a lot more powerful than others, and I don't want to have duds. I mean, I don't want to be sitting with an Orzhov charm in my hand, and I'm not trying to offend any Orzhov charm fans out there. In the proper build, it can be a very useful charm. Not in every deck, though. So we're looking for relevance and versatility in the modes for our charms, with a preference to the 3 color charms, because the more mana symbols in our spells, the more colors our spells are, the more +1/+1 counters Ramos gets. All right, so let us begin with our Simic charm. Target creature gets +3/+3 until end of turn, or permanents we control gain hexproof, or return target creature to its owner's hand. So we can buff Ramos for potential lethal commander damage. We can play a combat trick with the first mode. Hexproof for our permanents is probably the most desirable way in which is the most desirable manner of having Simic Charm in our deck, particularly to protect our end game. And as you see the deck list, continue to become more and more apparent, you'll know why hexproof for our permanents is going to be an important feature. And plus, returning target creature to its owner's hand, it could be one of our opponents, it could be one of ours, it could be Ramos. So Simic Charm is charm number 1. Charm number 2, again with the protection theme in mind, we are going to show Boros Charm. 4 damage to target player, which 10% of a starting player's life, in comparison to a format such as Standard or Pioneer or Modern, I mean, that's a shock. So Boros Charm's first ability, it's okay. It can get some damage in, but it's definitely not the main reason why it's in here, but it's not irrelevant. Number 2, permanents we control are indestructible this turn. That is the moneymaker right there. Thirdly, however, and one that we should not overlook, target creature gets double strike till end of turn. And if we pull Boros Charm down a little bit, Ramos comes in as a 4/4. And if we put at least 5+1/+1 counters on him to be able to activate his second ability, and we cast a Boros Charm while he's attacking, well, let's face it, that's 18 commander damage in one flying swoop. So Boros Charm fits the bill of relevant charm for this EDH build. Next up, and maybe a little bit of a surprising one for you charm fans out there, we have Azorius Charm. Okay, we got a white and a blue, and creatures we control gain lifelink until end of turn. So let's not overshadow too much the importance of lifelink. And we can draw a card, which is always, we can just draw a card and put a couple of counters on Ramos. The drawing card charms are going to be very important as you see the end game coming closer and closer. And in addition, it offers some defense by putting target attacking or blocking creature on top of its owner's library. So we can save one of our own creatures from combat, or we can get rid of one of our opponents. Azorius Charm is sneaky good. I'm telling you, folks, it is a sneaky good charm. Try it out. Now, for versatility's sakes, there may not be a charm more versatile and powerful in our format than Rakdos Charm. So, black and a red, exile all cards from target player's graveyard. Because EDH players don't use their graveyards ever, right? And destroy target artifact, because EDH players don't have powerful artifacts, right? Or each creature deals 1 damage to its controller, because, token armies don't exist in EDH. Tribal theme isn't a thing, right? Rakdos Charm is amazing. Its modes are uber relevant, and a fine addition to this Ramos commander deck. And this is our last guild charm. So we only have 5 of the 14 charms are 2 colors, and the last one is It Charm. Blue and a red, we can counter target non-creature spell unless its controller pays 2, which sometimes can surprise an opponent. It's not a straight counter spell, but sometimes opponents will tap out and cast something huge and we can counter it. Or Is It Charm deals 2 damage to target creature. We can get rid of some of those, super annoying little commanders like a Hepatra that comes in, and any of those other creatures. We can just a quick 2 damage and put them back to the command zone. Or more importantly, we can draw 2 cards and then discard 2 cards. So again, there's that draw mechanic, that draw mode that's going to be so important for this deck's functionality. All right, next up, we're moving to our 3 color charms, and we're going to start off with a Naya Charm. 3 damage to target creature, so we got removal. Return target card from a graveyard to its owner's hand. So we have recursion on any one of our cards, plus the potential for any political shenanigans by putting one of our opponent's cards into their hand from their graveyard. And we can tap all creatures target player controls. That can help for defense, or that can help as an end of turn. We're sending in something huge. I can't say it's going to be a ton of things, but Naya Charm does a lot of work, and it's a good spot for charm number 6. All right, hitting the halfway point of our charms. This is charm number 7, and we're going back in time, folks. We're going back with Croesus's Charm. We had a Grixis Charm here that we can return target permanent to its owner's hand. Notice the text. It's target permanent, not target permanent an opponent controls, not target permanent we control. Any permanent bounced to the hand. Very, very useful. Destroy target non-black creature. Okay, I admit that's not as useful as just destroy target creature. Granted, a Terminate would be better here than a Croesus's Charm for the purposes of removing a creature, but non-black creature, there's lots of other creatures that don't have black in them. So let's just keep that in mind. If we're playing against a straight black deck, all right, maybe we're trying to get rid of an artifact creature, or we're choosing one of the other 2 modes. But destroy target non-black creature, it can't be regenerated. Mode 3, destroy target artifact. So Croesus's Charm brings a lot of protection, removal, bounce. Very good charm for this deck. All right, next up we're going to the Tarkir block. Jeskai Charm. Blue, red, and a white. Put target creature on top of its owner's library. Again, any creature. Doesn't have to be ours, doesn't have to be our opponent's. Jeskai Charm deals 4 damage to target opponent, so that's similar to the Boros Charm. And creatures we control get +1/+1 and gain lifelink until end of turn. That could be very valuable if we amass a 2/2 black zombie creature token army from Field of the Dead. So Jeskai Charm, again, brings defense and offense. Okay, now we're taking a trip to Alara block, and we have Esper Charm. White, blue, black, target or destroy target enchantment. Very good. Draw 2 cards. Very, very good. Target player discards 2 cards. That's fantastic. Enchantment removal, card advantage, resource denial. Esper Charm, slam dunk. Staying with the Alara block, bam, Bant Charm. Green, white, blue, destroy target artifact, or put target creature on the bottom of its owner's library, or counter target instant spell. Artifact removal, creature removal, potential counter spell. Bant Charm is included. It's important. You'll see why as we get this deck list moving. Staying in the Alara block, June Charm. Black, red, green, remove target player's graveyard from the game. So exile target player's graveyard. Okay. June Charm deals 2 damage to each creature, so we Pyroclasm, or we can put 2 +1/+1 counters on target creature. So if we pull back just a little bit, exposing Ramos up there, if we cast June Charm and put 2 +1/+1 counters on Ramos, it ends up with 5 total +1/+1 counters because there's 3 colors in the spell. So this one charm can put 5 +1/+1 counters on Ramos, making him online in order to remove those counters to give us 10 mana to our mana pool. All right, that was charm number 11. We got 3 left, folks. Next up, we are back in time with Treva's Charm. Green, white, blue, destroy target enchantment, or remove target attacking creature from the game, which means exile target attacking creature. This charm predates the exile keyword, or we can draw a card and then discard a card from our hand. All right, so we loot, we exile an attacking creature, or we destroy an enchantment. Treva's Charm is in, baby. All right, and we're going back to the Tarkir block for our last 2 charms. Sultai Charm. Destroy target monocolored creature. Again, there's that little bit of restriction, that little limitation. That was the same thing when we were talking about Croesus's Charm. But still, there's a lot of monocolored creatures out there. Sultai Charm makes up for it by giving us the option of destroying target artifact or enchantment. The only charm that allows us to do that in this deck. So that's fine right there. And the third mode, we draw 2 cards and then discard a card. Sultai Charm is charm number 13. And closing it out, our 14 charms that are going to be the lifeblood of our deck. Abzan Charm. Exile target creature with power 3 or greater. We draw 2 cards or lose 2 life, or we distribute 2 +1/+1 counters among 1 or 2 target creatures. Again, similar to June's Charm, if we pull down Abzan Charm, exposing Ramos again, we see that by casting Abzan Charm, putting 2 +1/+1 counters on Ramos, it'll also get 3 +1/+1 counters because of the mana, the colored spell, the 3 mana symbols for the 3 colors of the charm, putting 5 total +1/+1 counters on Ramos. So Abzan Charm is in. All right, folks, those are the 14 lucky charms of Ramos Dragon Engine. So we'll clear these babies out of the way. And now let's talk about some ramp, because we want to make sure we can get Ramos out there, get our mana set, and do what we want to do. So let's start off with Burgeoning. Because of the cards we're going to have in our hand, and we're going to have a lot of cards in our hand, anytime our opponents play a land, we play a land. Burgeoning is in. And of course, namesake of the channel, we have to include it. And of course, if we're talking about mana accelerants, best artifact in the format, Soul Ring goes in. That's an easy decision. Additionally, Arcane Signet, another one of the best artifacts in our format, that's going in. Taps for 1 mana of any color. And Felwar Stone, This is our artifact version of Exotic Orchard, and we can tap for a mana of any color of a land that an opponent controls could produce. All right, next up we have Doubling Cube. This artifact 2 to cast. We can tap 3, tap this, double the amount of each type of mana in our mana pool. So if we pull down and we look at Ramos, and we have a Doubling Cube in play, if we remove 5+1/+1 counters to add 10 mana to our mana pool, we can use 3 of that to turn Doubling Cube sideways, and now suddenly we have 14 mana in our mana pool. Nice. Doubling Cube is in. Next, Chromatic Lantern. Color fixing is a must for this deck because of the number of multicolored spells that we have. So any other way that we can fix the mana, and Chromatic Lantern definitely does that, is going to be included in the deck. Okay, from a ramping standpoint, again with the idea of keeping the mana colored as best we can, we have Smothering Tithe. 3 and a white. Are you going to pay 2 for that? Are you going to pay 2 for that? Are you going to pay 2 for that? If not, we're creating a treasure. Okay. And here is a card that, this card is ridiculous in this deck. It is, well, I'll just put it out there. All right, we got Prismatic Geoscope. For 5, it comes into play tapped, which is not ideal. However, it has the domain mechanic. And that means we can tap and add X mana in any combination of colors to our mana pool, where X is the number of basic land types among lands we control. Remembering our mana base, we will have all 5 land types. So to have an artifact that can tap for 5 mana and we get to choose the combination of colors is ridiculously powerful. Prismatic Geoscope is underplayed. And lastly, for our mana ramp, we have Animist's Awakening. X and a green, reveal the top X cards of our library, put all land cards from among them onto the battlefield tapped, and the rest on the bottom of our library in a random order. This has the spell mastery mechanic, which means if there are 2 or more instant and or sorcery cards in our graveyard, we untap those lands. And this is one of the great spells that if we have Alchemist's Refuge in play would be fantastic. We pull 5 counters off of Ramos, add 10 to our mana pool, take 2 away to activate the Alchemist's Refuge, jam 7 into X, cast Animist's Awakening, and get a bunch of lands onto the battlefield. Alright, so now let's start talking about some card advantage. We did our mana ramp, now it's time for card advantage. Rhystic Study. We know the story. You're going to pay 1 for it, or we're drawing a card. Next up, we have Praetor's Council. 5 and triple green, we return all cards from our graveyard to our hand, and then we exile Praetor's Council. We have no maximum hand size for the rest of the game. Very, very important. Reap the Past. X red and a green, return X cards at random from our graveyard to our hand, then exile Reap the Past. We should be able to bring our entire graveyard to our hand with the amount of mana we can produce in this deck. Again, very important. Mind Spring, X and double blue. Very simply, draw X cards. A great card to be flash enabled by Alchemist's Refuge and Ramos Dragon Engine. Finale of Revelation. Again, X and double blue. However, we draw X cards, but if X is 10 or more, instead we shuffle our graveyard into our library, we draw X cards, untap up to 5 lands, and we have no maximum hand size for the rest of the game. We exile Finale of Revelation. This is draw spell target number 1, and you'll see why as we move further with the deck list. Next, we have Expansion and Explosion. For Expansion, we tap any combination of 2 Izzet color, and we copy target instant or sorcery spell with converted mana cost 4 or less. We may choose new targets for the copy. The Explosion part, an X, 2 blue and 2 red. An explosion deals X damage to any target. Target player draws X cards. A great instant with Ramos. We take off 5 +1/+1 counters, we add that 10 mana to our mana pool. We draw 6 cards and deal 6 points of damage to any target. Fantastic. Speaking of fantastic instants to use with the Ramos activation, Sphinx's Revelation. X a white and double blue, gain X life, draw X cards. Just like that. Not much more to say about that. All right, so to go with our card advantage spells, we're going to include some tutors because we want to make sure we can get our engine online, and sometimes tutors are the best way to do that. Mystical Tutor gets us our instant or our sorcery, puts it on the top of our library, and then we end up drawing it. Same thing with Enlightened Tutor, except it's not an instant or sorcery, it's an artifact or enchantment. And then Vampiric Tutor, well, that's any card. It costs us 2 life, but we put that card on top of our library, and we just hope to draw it as soon as possible. Skipping the whole shuffling and putting it on top of our library, we'll just cast a Demonic Tutor for 1 and a black and search our library for our card and put it right directly into our hand so that we can use it immediately. All right, folks, so that's the ramp, that's the card advantage, and those are the tutors. So let's clean this up, and now let's talk about our removal. Okay, so similar to the charms that we included in this deck, we wanted as many removal spells that have, multiple colors in them, so we can take advantage of putting the +1/+1 counters on Ramos. And all but one of the following cards fits those limitations, those criterion. And well, first one, Assassin's Trophy. Golgari colors, destroy target permanent opponent controls. They can search their library for a basic land card if they have it and put it into play. That's fine because, let's be honest, we've all come across games where getting rid of a permanent is much more important than gifting our opponent a basic land. And with our Foreshadowing complete, this is the only removal spell, disruption spell, however you want to word it, that is not multicolored, and, well, it's Cyclonic Rift. It's blue, it's overloaded, everything that's a non-land permanent that our opponents control are put back into their hands. Very powerful, tough to come back from. End of turn Cyclonic Rift generally leads to a finished game shortly thereafter. Next up, we have Putrefy, 1 black and a green. Destroy target artifact or creature. It can't be regenerated. There's the multicolor, and there is the versatility of target artifact or creature. Staying with the same idea, we have Mortify. 1 white and a black, destroy target creature or enchantment. Okay, next up, you're seeing a trend here, yes? Anguished Unmaking. 1 white and a black, exile target non-land permanent. We lose 3 life, but that's okay. Similar to Assassin's Trophy, exchanging 3 life for the removal of a non-land permanent, that's fine. We'll do that every day of the week, and most likely twice on Friday Night Magic. And of course, here is the obligatory greatest flavor text ever. Sorin had created Avacyn. So it was a cruelty beyond imagining, a pain beyond description, that it fell upon him to end her forever. Best flavor text ever. Next removal spell. This one offers us a great number of modes, and that is Kaya's Guile. 1 white and a black, we get to pick any of the following 2. However, if we entwine it for an additional 3 colorless or generic mana, we can choose all 4. Each opponent sacrifices a creature. Fantastic against Voltron's strategies. Exile all cards from each opponent's graveyard. That is extremely powerful because, let's face it, this is EDH. Everyone is using their graveyard as an additional resource. Mode number 3, create a 1/1 white and black spirit creature token with flying. And mode 4, we gain 4 life. So Kaya's Guile offers additional versatility. Next up, with the idea of fighting the fight against the Voltron strategies, we have Crackling Doom. For Mardu colors, this instant deals 2 damage to each opponent, and each opponent sacrifices a creature with the greatest power among creatures he or she controls. Make no mistake, folks, this card is included just against the Voltron decks. Godo, Bandit Warlord, that guy is just ridiculous. So including a Crackling Doom and trying to get rid of him when he's swinging in with 14 equipment on him, So Crackling Doom is definitely in there for those Voltron strategies. All right, next up we have Supreme Verdict. 1 double white and a blue. Supreme Verdict can't be countered. Destroy all creatures. As the number of cards continue to pile up in this deck list, you may be noticing, where are the creatures? Where are the creatures? Well, folks, the creatures in this deck are very, very scarce. There are a few, and they were chosen because of their fit, but there are not many in this deck. So board wipes like Supreme Verdict are absolutely important, because we're not going to lose anything more than maybe 1 or 2 creatures outside of an army of zombie tokens created by Field of the Dead. So Supreme Verdict is in. Next up, we jump to Gate Crash, and we are looking at Merciless Eviction. 4 and an Orzhov. We choose 1. We exile all artifacts, we exile all creatures, we exile all enchantments, or we exile all planeswalkers. Historically, it's the exile all creatures mode and the exile all planeswalker modes that have been the 2 modes I've used most when playing with this deck. Because like I said just a moment ago, we're not a creature heavy deck, and a lot of other opponents are. Speaking of which, the perfect board wipe for a Voltronish deck is Dune Blast. 4 and an Abzan, choose up to 1 creature, which, let's be honest, it's gonna be Ramos, and then we destroy the rest. Dune Blast is perfect for what Ramos wants to do, plus puts 3+1/+1 counters on him. Alright, and our last removal spell is courtesy from Ikoria, a Lair of Behemoths, and that is Ruinous Ultimatum. Destroy all non-land permanents your opponents control. So for the same CMC as Cyclonic Rift, which, as we talked about earlier, returns all non-land permanents to their owner's hand, Ruinous Ultimatum, although the color fixing is a little more intense with that triple white, double red, and double black, this doesn't return the permanents to their owner's hands. This just flat out destroys them. So outside of a Darksteel Forge or outside of a, Boros Charm, Ruinous Ultimatum will do more to hurt our opponents than a Cyclonic Rift, as long as we can get those permanents into the graveyard. Alright, that is Ruinous Ultimatum. So, let's take a moment, let's clean up our removal spells, and then let's get into our win conditions and our win engine. Alright, so this deck is chock filled with win conditions, but the biggest win condition will come near the end. So to start things off, we're going to go to Modern Horizons. We're going to take a look at Aria Flame, a great, underplayed, underappreciated, unloved enchantment. 2 in a red. When it enters the battlefield, each opponent gains 10 life. So giving our opponents an additional 25% of their starting life total may not seem optimal, may not seem favorable, but we don't care. We won't care. Whenever we cast an instant or sorcery spell, we put a verse counter on Aria Flame, then it deals damage equal to the number of verse counters on it to target player or planeswalker. You're starting to see how we're able to build a great number of instant and sorcery spells to really trigger Aria Flame, and it is not a problem giving our opponents an extra 10 life. Okay, next up, another win condition. Aetherflux Reservoir. Whenever we cast a spell, we gain 1 life for each spell we've cast this turn. Pay 50 life. Aetherflux Reservoir deals 50 damage to target creature or player. Again, it's very similar to Aria Flame. We're counting our spells, we're putting on our counters, we're dealing damage, we're winning the game. Win condition number 3. This one's a beauty. Shark Typhoon. 5 and a blue enchantment from Ikoria, Lair of Behemoths. Whenever we cast a non-creature spell, we create an XX blue shark creature token with flying, where X is that spell's converted mana cost. Who doesn't want to create flying sharks? I mean, come on. This is one of the coolest cards that Wizards has developed in quite some time. Plus, we can cycle this for X, 1 and a blue, and if we do, we create an XX blue shark creature token with flying. You've seen the number of non-creature spells we have, which, if we pull the card down, is every single spell except for Ramos so far. So including a Shark Typhoon, that's just, an extra cherry on top. Next up, we have a 1,000-Year Storm. 4 and an Is It? Whenever we cast an instant or sorcery spell, copy it for each other instant and sorcery spell we've cast before it this turn, and we may choose new targets for the copies. If you've ever played with this card, and you've ever activated it to the point where you're copying 3, 4, 5 spells, you know how powerful that is. And it is an absolute death blow if we get that in play and we're able to protect it. Win condition number 5. Swarm Intelligence. A little overcosted for 6 and a blue. However, this enchantment lets us copy an instant or sorcery spell that we cast. And we may choose new targets for the copy. Okay. So that's not a bad inclusion. I mean, like I said, 6 and blue is a little high for what we're looking to have accomplished, but still, that does add to another win condition. Win condition number 6. Torment of Hailfire. If you've ever cast this spell or have had it cast against you, you know its power. X in double black, and you repeat the following process X times. Each opponent loses 3 life, unless that player sacrifices a non-land permanent or discards a card. With our ability to take counters off of Ramos, minimally, we're tormenting of Hailfiring for 7. For 8, jeez. 6, 7, 8. Come on, get your math straight. Seriously, I did go to school. I did graduate. I mean, I can count. X is 8, and that's formidable, folks. And that's without adding any mana from lands or rocks or doubling it with Doubling Cube. Torment of Hailfire, win condition. Speaking of win conditions, here's one of our best in Sultai colors, Villainous Wealth. Target opponent exiles the top X cards of their library. We may cast any number of non-land cards with converted mana cost X or less from among them without paying their mana costs. How about pairing Villainous Wealth with Alchemist's Refuge during one of our opponent's turns? Yeah, it's a beautiful thing, folks. It's a beautiful thing. And another win condition, this will wrap up this subset of cards here. We have Debt to the Deathless. X double white and double black. Each opponent loses 2 times X life. We gain life equal to the life lost this way. Because of our ability to create an immense amount of mana, Debt to the Deathless is actually a better and more powerful version than Exsanguinate. Once the converted mana cost of this spell hits 10, Debt to the Deathless outperforms Exsanguinate every time we include mana to it. It just can't catch up. The 2 times X life, Exsanguinate can't catch up. Therefore, Debt to the Deathless trumps Exsanguinate and is added as one of our win conditions in this deck. Alright, so continuing with the theme of win conditions and going back and talking about our earlier foreshadowing about the number of creatures that we have in this deck, we do have a few creatures in this deck. And they are some creatures that are going to help us with mana. They're mana sinks. And they definitely help us with instant and sorcery spells. And, well, one of them is just a straight beatdown if we need to use it. So let's start off. Creature number 1, Golos, Tireless Pilgrim. For 5 generic or colorless, we get a 3/5 legendary scout. And when it enters the battlefield, we may search our library for a land and put it onto the battlefield tapped. Tap 2, white, blue, black, red, green, and we exile the top 3 cards of our library. And we may play them this turn without paying their mana costs. So Golos, in conjunction with Ramos, you take off the 5 counters from Ramos, you add the 10 mana, you use 7 of that 10 to activate Golos, cast some spells that put at least, hopefully, 5 more +1/+1 counters on Ramos, do it again during our next opponent's turn, hopefully we have a flash enabler, and it's just a cycle that just can't be stopped unless our opponents interact with it. And with the number of protection spells we have, we can consider Golos, Tireless Pilgrim as a win condition in this deck. Alright, next up, speaking of mana sinks, we got Kenrith, the Returned King. 4 and a white, this legendary human noble is a 5/5 body, which is pretty good in and of itself, except it has 5 unbelievably relevant abilities. For red, all creatures gain trample and haste until end of turn. For one and a green, we put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. There's Ramos. For 2 and a white, target player gains 5 life. For 3 and a blue, target player draws a card. And for 4 and a black, put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under its owner's control. Kenrith is awesome, and is definitely a win condition in this deck. Because of the number of instant and sorcery spells we have included in this deck already, if we didn't include Niv Mizzet Perrin, the MTG Burgeoning viewing audience might think there's something wrong. We love Nivy, and he is in. The Miz is in. It's a 5/5 for triple blue, triple red. So in a 5-color deck, that can be a little challenging, but if we're planning for it and we have the right mana fixes out there, casting Niv isn't a terrible burden. And Niv can't be countered. He has flying, and whenever we draw a card, Niv deals 1 damage to any target, and whenever any player casts an instant or sorcery spell, we draw a card. So there is a wonderful repeatable cycle here of casting spells, dealing damage, and drawing cards. Niv Mizzet, Perrin, another win condition. And talking about win conditions, our last one, well, it doesn't really have anything to do with instants or sorceries or non-creature spells. It's just a straight, if things are going sideways and we need something different, well, we can turn to Progenitus. Double white, double blue, double black, double red, double green, protection from everything, and a 10/10. And if it's put into our graveyard from anywhere, we reveal it and shuffle it into its owner's library. And just pulling this down a little bit, keeping in mind if we can line up the mana just right, taking off 5 +1/+1 counters from Ramos, pays for Progenitus's casting cost. And it's in there, folks. I mean, nobody said that this was going to be a fair deck. Not every one of these EDH Commander decks on EDH Commander Thursday are going to be fair. Sometimes we need to flex our muscles a little bit. All right, so those are 96. 3 cards left. Number 97, let's throw a Swiftfoot Boots into play. All right. 2 to cast, 1 to equip. Equipped creature has hexproof and haste. Now, there might be some questions as to why Lightning Greaves isn't included over Swiftfoot Boots. Well, hexproof for Ramos is much more important than the Shroud, because we have a number of spells that we saw earlier in this deck tech that say put X number of +1/+1 counters on target creature. And if that target creature has Shroud, well, that kind of hoses the additional +1/+1 counters. So hexproof and haste with Swiftfoot Boots, that's where we're going, and that's why it's included over Lightning Greaves. Card number 98 in the 99. And this is another flash enabler. This one's a little bit better than Alchemist's Refuge. Here we have Vidalcan Orrery. For 4 generic or colorless, we may cast non-land cards as though they had flash. Very simple, very powerful, not to be overlooked. And that is 98 of the 99. So what remains? What is card 99? What is our showstopper? What is the card that's going to bring this all together and make this a winning, competitive, powerful deck? We talked about it in the beginning. The most powerful card in our entire deck is Omniscience. Yep, folks, we're playing Omniscience. We're playing to cast it. We're playing to protect it. We're planning to win with it. 7 and triple blue. We may cast non-land cards from our hand without paying their mana costs. So, in a perfect world, we've got Ramos in play. We cast Omniscience with a fistful of cards, and some of our win conditions, which could include Aria of Flame or Shark Typhoon, or Niv Mizzet, any of the win conditions that you see here, with the ultimate win condition of Omniscience. And as you saw with some of our charms, Hexproof, the Hexproof from Simic Charm, the Indestructible mode from Boros Charm, the counter spells, counter target instant spell, counter target non-creature spell, all of those were included with the idea of protecting Omniscience so that we can complete our game-winning engine. If we also have the Dalkin Orrery in play, any spell in our hand that doesn't have X in it, we can cast it without paying any mana for it. Imagine having an Aetherflux Reservoir in play when we cast Omniscience, and we cast a bunch of instant and sorcery removal spells, some charms, and then we cast a Praetor's Council, return our entire graveyard back to our hand, do it all over again. Or if we have an Aria of Flame, or if we have a Shark Typhoon and we're doing all of this, end of opponent's turn. Omniscience is the most powerful card in this deck, and yes, this is an Omniscience deck. We are planning to cast this. We have tutors set up to find it. We're going to cast it. We're going to protect it. And this, in conjunction with Ramos, we're going to win with it. Because with all the number of spells we can cast off of Omniscience, the number of +1/+1 counters that can be put on Ramos, we can clear the pathway for at least lethal commander damage to one of our opponents if we even need to, if we for some reason can't win with the bevy of other win conditions we have here, like a dozen other win condition cards. Omniscience and Ramos, good things, folks, good things. And that's it. This is MTG Burgeoning, and this is Ramos Dragon Engine EDH Commander Deck Tech. Leave me some comments for what you think about this deck, if you run a Ramos Dragon Engine deck, or if you have any comments or suggestions on how to play it differently. You can check out the deck list by clicking on the link below at www.tappedout.net. This is MTG Burgeoning, folks. Go forth and enjoy your day.